She doesn't speak, she hisses. And in that one sound, animal, electric, and furious, Elsa Lanchester created the most iconic and enduring image of the monstrous feminine in Hollywood history. She had only a few minutes on screen in The Bride of Frankenstein, but it was enough to change history. And here's what's strange about that, because we live in an era of maximalism. 3-hour runtimes, extended cuts, characters are given backstory, motivation, redemption arcs, sequels. But yet the most iconic female monster in Hollywood history appears on screen for less time than it takes you to make a cup of tea. Think about what that means. Every Halloween costume, every gothic aesthetic mood board, every horror film that's tried to capture that specific electricity, the white streak, the bandages, the recoil, all of it comes from just a few minutes of film recorded in 1935. But to understand what Lanchester did in those few minutes, you really have to understand who she was as an actress. Because the woman underneath the bandages was far more interesting and far more subversive than the creature on top of them. But before we get into who Elsa was, let's talk about who I am. Because hi, my name is Cassidy Krieger from Hollywoodland Photos. And if you love everything that's old Hollywood, classic literature, and things that kind of made pop culture tick last century, I would love it if you could hit that subscribe button so I can continue to grow this channel and keep talking about the things that I love, and I hope that you love them too, and I'll be forever grateful. Elsa Lanchester was not a conventional woman, and I don't mean that as like a throwaway compliment. I mean it structurally, biographically, from the very beginning, from the moment before she was even conceived. Her parents refused to marry, either legally or religiously, as a deliberate act of rebellion against Edwardian society. So Elsa was, by birth, a statement. As a teenager, she was performing in the London avant-garde cabaret scene. She trained as a dancer under Isadora Duncan, the woman who essentially invented modern movement. Isadora believed that the body should be free, uncontained, expressive in ways that classical tradition had been suppressing for decades, centuries. This training matters. We will come back to it. She married Charles Laughton, one of the greatest actors of his generation. Their marriage was unconventional in ways that Hollywood didn't really want to look at. It sheltered him, but it gave her a sense of freedom. It was a partnership of mutual understanding rather than a performance of respectability. She was sharp, witty, and deliberately strange. She once said she had no regrets about her life, and I think that's either one of the most incredibly freeing things a person can say or the most subversive, and I think it was a bit of both. So when James Whale cast Elsa as the Bride of Frankenstein, he wasn't just casting an actress. He was casting a woman who understood in her bones what it felt like to be looked at and found wrong, to be created for somebody else's purpose and to refuse it anyway. And let's talk about the performance itself, because this is where most people stop paying attention and where they really, really shouldn't. The bride has no dialogue, no monologue, no scene where she sits down across from another character and explains her inner thoughts and feelings. She's given only a few minutes of screen time and a body wrapped in bandages. And Elsa feels every single second of it. The first thing you notice as an audience member is the movement. She doesn't move like a human being. She doesn't move like the monster, not in the lurching, heavy way that Boris Karloff moved as the creature. She moves like a bird. Jerky, precise, tilted, alert. Her head snaps, her eyes dart. But there's something in the quality of her stillness that is more unsettling than any movement, because you feel like she could go in any direction at any moment. That is not an accident. That is Isadora Duncan. I told you we'd circle back to this dance training, because when you train under a woman who believed movement should originate from the solar plexus, from the emotional center of the body, you learn that physicality means something. Every gesture carries weight. Every stillness is a choice. Every movement we make as human beings has some sort of substance, some sort of meaning, objective behind it. Elsa took that training, ran with it, and created something so completely non-human. And the result is extraordinary. And then there's that hiss. She based it on swans, which sounds comical until you've been hissed at by a swan, and then it makes complete sense. The makeup and lighting forced her to keep her eyes unnaturally wide. The bandages were wound so tight. The hair, that extraordinarily white streaked tower of hair, was wired into place, so Elsa was physically constrained in almost every direction. But she still made a way to find the bride feel explosive. And that's the paradox at the center of this performance. A woman wrapped so tightly she can barely move, radiating more danger, more refusal, more presence than anybody else on that screen. And there's something almost too neat about that metaphor. Almost. Because the moment that defines this performance, the moment that the entire film hinges on, is the rejection. Creature reaches for her. He's waited the entire film for her. He believes that she was made for him. And her answer? She recoils. She looks at him and the look is not fear exactly, which is what the creature is used to. It's something colder than fear, something closer to revulsion, to refusal. She was made to be his companion. She was given no say in that. She was made, assembled, and brought back from the dead, all in service of somebody else's need. And here's something that almost gets overlooked every time people talk about the Bride of Frankenstein. Elsa Lanchester plays two roles, not one, two. She opens the film as Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein, seated in a drawing room, composed, luminous, telling the story of Frankenstein to Byron and Shelley on a stormy night. Gentle, witty, utterly in control of the room. And then she appears at the end as the bride, wrapped, constrained, hissing. James Whale made that decision deliberately. He believed the actress playing the bride should also play Mary Shelley because horror, he believed, springs from the deepest and darkest parts of our imagination. The woman who creates the monster and the monster she creates should be the same body. Think about what that means structurally. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein at 19 in a house full of men, Byron, Percy, Shelley, during a ghost story competition. I would love to be at that competition, please. The men wrote fragments, abandoned ideas. Shelley wrote a novel. And the novel is about the violence of creation without consent. Frankenstein makes a creature and immediately rejects it. He does not think about whether this creature wants to exist. He does not consider what he owes it. He creates it for his own ambition and abandons it the moment it becomes inconvenient. Sound familiar? Because James Whale understood that Mary Shelley didn't just write that story, she lived adjacent to it. A woman in a room full of men creating something extraordinary, watching it be received on other people's terms. So when Lanchester sits at the opening of the film as Mary Shelley, composed, in control, telling the story, and then reappears at the end as the bride, created, constrained, refusing, that is not a casting coincidence. To me, that is the argument. And then consider this. The film is named after her. She is the title. She is a promise the marketing makes to every single person that buys a ticket to see this film. And she doesn't appear until the final few minutes of the runtime. The entire film is in anticipation of her arrival. And then when she comes, she refuses. The title character in her own film, denying the very premise the film was built around. That's not just a performance. To me, that's a structural argument. The one who imagines the monster and the one who becomes her are inseparable. And both of them, in their own way, are refusing to be what the room expects of them. Elsa Lanchester, bohemian, unconventional, sharp and free, understood both women completely because she had spent most of her life being both of them. So let's talk about the 2026 film The Bride. I haven't seen it yet. My full review is coming next and I'll watch it with as open as a mind as I can. From what I've seen and read about it, it seems to make a very different choice about the central question of this essay. It gives the bride agency, a bride who warms up, who develops, who in some sense chooses. And I find that genuinely interesting, not because I think it's wrong at all, but because it asks a question that the 1935 film never had to answer. What happens when you give the bride a choice? Because here's the thing. The power in Elsa's performance lives entirely in the absence of choice. She was given no say in her creation, no say in her purpose, no say in who she was made for, and she still said no. Whether a Bride of Frankenstein who was given agency from the start can carry the same weight, whether that version of the character can be equally radical in a different way, I genuinely don't know yet. But I mean, that's what my upcoming review is for. But I do know this. The question the 2026 film is asking, what does she want, is only possible because the 1935 film never asked it. Lanchester's bride didn't get to want anything, but she still found a way to choose. Not because it's better, but because it understood something about powerlessness and resistance that no amount of agency can replicate. You can only appreciate the power of her saying, well, not saying, but with her body saying no when you understand that she was never supposed to have that power at all. We're wrapping up now. The further along this goes, my hair's getting like more and more frizzy. It's so hot and humid here today. My hair by the end of this is going to be as intense as the Bride of Frankenstein's. But here's what I keep coming back to, because Elsa Lanchester was on screen for only a few minutes. Every time I think about that, it just is mind-boggling. She had no dialogue. She was wrapped in bandages. The makeup and lighting forced her to be so uncomfortable. I mean, she was physically constrained in every way humanly possible. And yet she created an image so powerful that 90 years later, Hollywood's still trying to answer the question that her image created. Because The Bride of Frankenstein poses a question that no reboot has satisfactorily resolved. What do you do with a woman who refuses. Not a woman who is freed, not a woman who is given agency by a progressive screenplay, not a woman who chooses the right man in the end, but a woman who was built for a purpose that she never agreed to and looked at that purpose in the face and hissed. And Emily Bronte, who I keep thinking about because I always do. I mean, Wuthering Heights fuels me. Emily Bronte understood something when she wrote Kathy saying, I am Heathcliff. Not I love him, not I choose him, I am him. Because these women, both Victorian and pre-code Hollywood, Edwardian, not, everyone in between, these women keep arriving at the same place. Identity cannot be given. It cannot be assembled by someone else in a laboratory. It cannot be granted by a man who decides that you should exist. It is taken or it is refused. And Elsa Lanchester refused with just a few minutes on screen and with a hiss, and Hollywood still hasn't quite recovered. Before you buy your ticket to the 2026 version, and please do, we want to keep movies and cinemas open and alive for as long as possible. It's alive. Watch the 1935 Bride of Frankenstein, because the most incredible thing about the bride is that she doesn't need saving, and she never did.